welcome to my channel. Today I want to tell you a few horror stories from Reddit. Don't hesitate to rate the video, it will be the best support. Let's get started. Story 1. I work as a dispatcher for the 911 service. I receive calls from an unknown number. I've been a 911 dispatcher for 12 years, the last 7 on the night shift. You'd think after that long you've heard it all. Drunk dials, domestic disputes, people panicking after car accidents, struggling to find the right words. It all becomes white noise, a rhythm of human suffering you learn to process without letting it touch you. You have to. It's the only way to keep your sanity. My county is a sprawling, sleepy area that shuts down after 10 p.m., mostly homeowners and retirees. On a slow weeknight, the worst we get are noise complaints or teenagers who've had too much to drink. My job became a loop. Caffeine, fluorescent lights, the quiet hum of computer servers. I was burned out. Deep down, to that existential exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. The calls were just flashes on a screen, voices to be processed, categorized, and forwarded. I was a living switchboard for people on their worst days. The first time that call came in was a Tuesday, about 3 months ago. 2:47 a.m., the quietest hour of the quietest night. A line lit up on my console, but it wasn't a normal call. Not a cell with a GPS signal, not a landline with a registered address. Just a raw signal, flagged as unregistered VoIP. Not unheard of, but rare. I took it. 911, what's your emergency? Static. Thick, wet static, like listening to a radio underwater. The line crackled and popped, and beneath it, I could barely make out a faint whisper. Hello? Can you hear me? A child's voice. A boy, 7 or 8, I guessed. He sounded like he was trying to talk without moving his lips. This is 911, I repeated, louder and clearer. I can barely hear you. Can you speak up? The static surged, almost drowning him out completely. He came back. The man in the mask came back. A cold, sharp chill ran down my spine. The professional kind. The one that tells you, this is real. This isn't a prank. Okay, son, where are you? I need your address. Mommy's hurt. The whisper came again, broken by sobs. The static sounded like a swarm of angry insects now. Daddy's on the floor. He's not moving. Son, I need you to tell me where you are. I can't send help if I don't know where you are. My fingers flew across the keyboard, trying to trace the location, but the system errored out. No location data, no caller info, nothing. The old house, he whispered, his voice fading. At the end of the road. Please. Then the line went dead. No click, no disconnect tone. It just ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a strip of static and terror, and the next, just a dead channel. Even without an exact address, the old house at the end of the road was enough. On the western edge of the county, there's a long dirt road that eventually curves into the woods. And at the end of that road sits a house. A big, abandoned Victorian mansion, empty for as long as anyone in town can remember. A local legend, the kind kids dare each other to visit to prove their bravery. I sent a patrol car. The senior officer, a man who'd been on the force before I was born, radioed me about 15 minutes later. His voice was flat, with that annoyance reserved for wasted time. Dispatch, Unit 12 on scene. Property is clear, no signs of entry. The building's boarded up tight. No one here. And from the looks of it, no one has been here in about 50 years. 10-4, Unit 12, I said, my voice betraying no confusion.
You're sure? Caller was a child. Said his family was under attack. A sigh crackled over the radio. Look, there's an inch of dust on the porch. The boards on the windows are nailed shut solid. If anyone's in there, they're ghosts. We're clearing out. If this prankster calls again, tell him it's not funny. I logged it as a false call and tried to forget it. Just a prank. Elaborate, maybe, using a voice changer and a spoofed VoIP. Kids these days, I guess. I was too tired to care. A week later, again at 2:47 a.m., the same line lit up. The same static. The same terrified, whispering voice. He's in the house. I can hear him walking around. This time, I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Son, is this you? Did you call last week? A choked sob. He's wearing a mask. The one with the scary smile. Mommy's screaming. Through the storm of static, I thought I heard it. A woman's scream, high-pitched, thin and distorted, like it was being played backward. I'm sending help, I said, my voice tight. Stay on the line with me. Can you hide? In the closet, the boy whispered. He's coming up the stairs. I can hear his footsteps. The line went dead. This time, I sent 2 cars. I told them it was a repeat call, possible hostage situation. I didn't want them to be casual. They took it seriously. Set up a perimeter, used the loudspeaker, battered down the front door. Same result. Empty house. A thick, undisturbed layer of dust on every surface. Rotten floorboards, peeling wallpaper, the smell of mold and damp. No signs. No child. No man in a mask. No evidence that a single person had set foot in that house in the last 10 years. The next morning, my supervisor pulled me aside. A big, patient man with the weary look of someone who's seen it all. He told me to let it go. It's a glitch, he said, avoiding my eyes. Crossed lines from another jurisdiction or some kind of electronic echo. Don't waste county resources on it. If the call comes again, just log it and move on. But I couldn't. The boy's voice, it was too real. The fear in it was primal. You can't fake that. No actor in the world can mimic the voice of a child hearing his mother being killed in the next room. The calls didn't stop. Every Tuesday, like clockwork, at 2:47 a.m. Each call a new piece of the same terrible puzzle. He's hurting Daddy. There's so much red. Mommy stopped screaming. He's looking for me. I can hear him opening doors. Each time, I sent a car. Each time, the same result. The officers got angrier. I became the boy who cried wolf. My supervisor gave me a formal warning. My coworkers started looking at me sideways, whispering when I walked by. They thought I was losing it. Maybe I was. I started sleeping badly. On my days off, I'd catch myself watching the clock, my heart hammering as 2:47 a.m. approached. The silence, somehow, was worse than the calls. I became obsessed. During the day, instead of sleeping, I went to the county records office. I needed to know who owned that house. The records were a mess, sold and resold, owned by banks and holding companies. But I kept digging, going through dusty ledgers and tattered deeds. Finally, I found them. The last family to live there. A document from 1968. A nice, happy family. Mother, father, and 2 children. A boy and a girl. It wasn't enough. I started spending days in the library basement, scrolling through decades of newspapers on a creaky old microfiche reader.
The musty, papery smell of the archives filled my lungs.
I looked for anything connected to that house, that family. For weeks, I found nothing. Just property tax notices and school honor rolls. But eventually, I found it. An article dated a cold, late autumn day in 1975. The headline was stark. Local family slain in home invasion. My blood ran cold. I zoomed in, my hands shaking as I adjusted the focus. The image was grainy, black and white. It was the house. The same steep gables, the same wide porch. Police cars parked haphazardly on the overgrown lawn. I read the article, my heart pounding in my chest. The husband, wife, and their 10-year-old daughter were found dead in their home. The cause of death wasn't stated directly. The article was vague, using phrases like severe trauma. The police report mentioned a possible intruder, a figure a neighbor had seen fleeing into the woods, described as a tall man in a white mask. But it was the last paragraph that made me hold my breath. The family's 8-year-old son, it read, remains missing. Police found evidence suggesting he was hiding in an upstairs closet during the attack, but the boy was never located. A statewide search is underway. Authorities have not ruled out abduction. The crime was never solved. The man in the mask was never found. The little boy was never seen again. I leaned back in my chair, and the library basement suddenly felt like a tomb. The static, the whisper, the closet, the man in the mask. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a glitch. Was I hearing a ghost? The next day at work, I felt broken. I walked into the dispatch center like a zombie. The hum of the servers sounded like a funeral dirge. I couldn't keep it in anymore. I needed to tell someone.
I found my supervisor and one of the senior dispatchers, a woman who'd been here 30 years, and pulled them into the break room. I laid it all out. The calls, the time, the empty house, the microfiche article. I showed them the printed copy of the article, the grainy image of the house, the headline. I expected them to think I was crazy, to tell me to take a leave of absence. They didn't. They just looked at each other. A look I'd never seen before, a look of grim, tired resignation. My supervisor sighed heavily and rubbed his temples. The senior dispatcher stared at the article, her face pale. "So it's started again," she whispered, barely audible. "What do you mean, started again?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What's going on?" My supervisor slumped into a chair. He looked like he'd aged 20 years. "Kid," he said, "I need to tell you about the man who worked here before you." He told me the story. The dispatcher who worked my console was a good man, sharp, dedicated. About a year before I was hired, he started acting strange, obsessed with a certain address, the old house at the end of the road. He kept sending cars out there, insisting calls for help were coming from it. Patrols always came back empty-handed. He started digging through old records, spending his weekends at the library. He became withdrawn, paranoid. He claimed he was getting calls no one else could hear. "We checked the logs," my supervisor said, his voice low and serious. "The system didn't register the calls he said he was taking. We pulled the audio from his console. There was nothing on them. Silence. We thought he was having a breakdown, job stress." My blood ran cold. The system. It doesn't log the calls. They just appear on the screen and then vanish. They don't go into the call history.
The senior dispatcher nodded slowly.
We know, same thing. He told us about those calls, the little boy, the man in the mask. I felt sick. What happened to him? I whispered, though I already knew the answer. One night, my supervisor continued, not looking up from the floor. He took another one of those calls. We saw him at his console. He was typing up a report, and then he just stopped. Stood up, grabbed his jacket and keys, and walked out without a word. The call was still active on his screen, but none of us could hear anything. Just an open line. What happened to him? He drove to that house. Next morning, his car was found parked on the road, engine cold, doors locked. He was just gone. The room was absolutely silent. They searched the house, the senior dispatcher said, her voice trembling. Police combed the woods, dogs, helicopters, the whole works. They went through that place from attic to basement. Nothing. No sign of a struggle. No footprints. He was just gone. Vanished off the face of the earth. I stared at them, trying to process what they were telling me. Why didn't you warn me? I managed. How do you think that conversation goes? My supervisor snapped, the accumulated frustration of years in his voice. Hey, new guy, welcome aboard. By the way, that console might be haunted and the last guy who sat there vanished. Don't worry about it. You'd think we were insane. We thought he was insane. Until you showed up with the same goddamn story. He leaned forward, his eyes meeting mine. Here's what you need to do. Next time that line lights up, you do not answer it. If you accidentally take the call, you hang up immediately. You do not talk to him. You do not listen. You terminate the call and clear the line. That's an order. You understand me? For the next few weeks, I was a ghost myself. I did my job on autopilot. Every sound, every light on the console made me jump. I dreaded Tuesday nights. I drank coffee by the liter just to stay sharp, to stay alert. I thought about quitting. I wanted to just walk away and never come back. But where would I go? And then, last night, it happened again. It was 2:45 a.m. I was watching the clock, gripping the edge of my desk with white-knuckled fingers. The minutes crawled by like hours. 2:46. My mouth was dry. My heart was a drum solo in my ears. 2:47. The light flashed. Unregistered VOIP. It was like a physical blow. My training, my instincts, every cell in my body screamed at me to answer. A child in danger. It was my job. But I remembered my supervisor's pale, exhausted face, and the story of the man who vanished. I was not to take the call. I let it ring. Once. Twice. The flashing light on the panel burned my eyes. My hand hovered over the answer key, trembling. I couldn't just ignore it. I had to answer. Had to. I pressed the button. 911, what's your... The static roared, louder than ever before, and through it came the boy's voice. Not a whisper this time, but a scream. A raw, tearing sound of pure agony and terror. "He's got me! He's got me, please! He's taking me! Please, sir, don't let him take me! Help me!" That sound pierced through my professional detachment and stabbed directly into my soul. This was it. The culmination. The moment the boy was taken, to be replayed forever. My hand shot to the keyboard to dispatch a car,
pure reflex born of years of training. But I stopped. My fingers froze. He's gone. It already happened. This isn't real. The boy was sobbing now, his screams turning into choked, broken pleas.
Please, you promised. You said you'd send help. Don't leave me. Tears pricked at my eyes. I was a 911 dispatcher. My job was to send help. And I was going to sit here and listen to a child be taken, be killed, and do nothing. I'm sorry, I whispered, my voice cracking. I'm so sorry. I reached for the disconnect button on my screen. My finger was a millimeter from the glass. This was it. I was choosing to save myself. I was choosing to leave him. And then the screaming stopped. Not a fade, a sharp cut, like a switch being flipped. The roar of static died down to a low, menacing hum. The line was still open. Silence. My heart stopped. Then a new sound came through my headset. Not the boy. A man's voice. A whisper, as terrified as the child's, but rougher. Distorted by the same noise, the same swarm of electronic insects. A voice trying to reach across an impossible distance, across time itself. And a voice I felt deep in my bones. A voice I should have recognized from the old staff photo in the hallway. The whisper was barely audible, but perfectly, horrifyingly clear. He's here. I froze, my finger still hovering over the button. He can see you, through the line. He's looking right at you. A cold terror washed over me, so absolute and deep it felt like death itself. Slowly, involuntarily, I raised my eyes from my console, looking across the darkened dispatch center to the large glass windows facing the night. There was nothing there but the reflection of my own terrified face in the glass, my skin pale in the light of the monitors. The whisper in my ear continued, a last, chilling plea from a place where there is no hope. Please, get me out of here. Story 2. I feel like my recovery isn't going as well as it should. I'm not saying this out of fear. I'm not scared or in pain. In fact, I feel calmer than I should. Comfortable. But I have gaps in my memory. Whole stretches of time I can't explain. And when I try to focus on them, my thoughts slip away. Let me start from the beginning. I finally made it back to my apartment. The place reeked of cleaning products and something faintly like harsh soap. Bleach and dish detergent, sharp enough to burn your throat. But at least the pests were gone. The Uber driver kindly helped me up the stairs. The bandages on my legs made walking difficult. It was a little strange seeing several of my neighbors' doors marked with extermination signs and sealed off with tape. But that was nothing compared to how happy I was to finally be home. Compared to the stiff hospital bed I'd spent 4 days in, my couch felt like it belonged in a romantic movie. I barely stopped myself from flopping onto it, still a little worried about what had landed me in the hospital in the first place. Nothing under the pillows, thank God. I carefully lowered myself onto my usual spot, hissing slightly as one of the wounds on my leg stretched unpleasantly. Still, it was an improvement. The bites were painful, but they were healing, slowly. Not scabbed over yet, but at least starting to close. Remote in hand, some low-quality Netflix romance on in the background, my favorite soda. Everything I needed to be happy. At least until the knock came at the door. Seriously. They told me my insurance would cover home care, but I've been home for 2 hours. My bandages shouldn't need changing for at least a day, right? With a groan of frustration, I pulled myself off the couch. The wounds on my back and legs threatened to reopen as I slowly made my way to the door. I wasn't expecting anything special. Maybe some college kid or a tired nurse. Anyone but the elderly, cheerful woman who greeted me, slipping inside the moment the door opened. My, what a lovely home. Oh, but you could use some cleaning. Must be hard for you right now, dear. Her sing-song voice grated on my nerves almost as much as the way she pushed past me. "Can I help you?" I asked flatly. Pretty sure I'd just let in a saleswoman or maybe a Jehovah's Witness. "Dear, I'm here to help you with all of this." She gestured at my bandages. So she really was my nurse. Okay. "Look, I don't want to be rude, but it's been a long week. Can we just do whatever needs to be done quickly?" My mother wouldn't have approved of my rudeness, but she'd never know. The woman froze for a second, looking at me with the same cheerful smile you'd see in a mayonnaise commercial. "Sit down, dear." Calm, still sweet. I headed back to the couch. The woman put a hand on my back when I stumbled, steadying me gently. Somehow she managed to avoid touching any wounds, and her hands were surprisingly warm. "Now, I'll just get something from my bag. You have something to take your medicine with, right? It's bitter, but it works wonders," she chirped, heading for the door with slightly alarming energy to grab the bag she'd left. I expected some herbal concoction, but she pulled out a regular orange prescription bottle. She unscrewed the cap and shook a couple of blue and pink capsules onto her open palm. "Just 2 today, dear. We might increase the dose later." Whatever was in that medicine, it worked fast. The pain vanished in an instant, replaced by weakness and a light dizziness. All the while, the nurse gently squeezed my shoulder. I remember how warm her hand was. After that, my memories get fuzzy. I know she put ointment on some of my worst wounds. We chatted a little, just small talk. "Any pain, fatigue, trouble sleeping?" she asked softly. I told her I was feeling sleepy. She just smiled. "That's normal. Means it's working, dear." That night, I slept better than I had in days. Didn't wake up from the pain of accidentally scraping off a scab. No nightmares about things crawling in my bed. Just black emptiness. The next morning, I woke up and found blood on my sheets. At first, my mind went to the worst place, but something dulled the panic before it could fully take hold. Even though I'd never been okay with seeing my own blood, that calmness scared me a little. Still, it helped me focus. The bandages, soaked with some kind of ointment the nurse had applied yesterday, had come loose. My left arm was exposed, blood seeping from the wounds. But I couldn't help noticing. The scabs were still there, not fallen off. Maybe the cream was working. I carefully got out of bed, bundled up the sheets, and threw them on the floor. I'd deal with them later. I'd barely made it to the kitchen when another knock came at the door. I took a deep breath, leaning on the kitchen counter, trying to gather the strength to make it to the door. The medicine had worn off. Every step hurt, every bandage rubbed against open wounds. "Coming!" The click of the doorknob cut me off. And there she was again. The same cheerful smile, the same beige cardigan, the same black bag with the tacky floral strap. "Oh, hello. Thanks for coming back," I said awkwardly, wondering how she'd gotten in. Had I left the door unlocked yesterday? "Hello, dear. Ready for your medicine?" Same tone, same energy. I willingly let her take over. I was tired. My whole body hurt. I just wanted it to stop. "Sure," I said. "Just give me a minute to make a sandwich or something." She gasped, covering her mouth with her hand.
"Oh, no, no, no. You need to rest, dear. Let me take care of that."
I tried to protest, but she grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the couch. The pain spiked, and the movement reminded me how well yesterday's painkillers had worked. I felt a flash of irritation as she made herself at home by my refrigerator, grabbing a cold bottle of water and handing it to me, along with another dose of blue and pink pills. Still, I couldn't complain. They worked. Within minutes, the pain faded, and the world around me started to blur. I must have been almost asleep when I was hit with a wonderful smell. Bacon. I looked from the TV, which it turned out I'd managed to turn back on, now playing a nature documentary, toward the kitchen. The nurse had put on an apron and was busy chopping salad. Any thought of objecting to her using my groceries was pushed aside by the anticipation of a real breakfast. And I was glad I said nothing. She made a classic breakfast: perfectly cooked eggs, fluffy and soft. Bacon just the way I like it. A little chewy, but with a crispy edge. She even made a couple of sandwiches, arranging everything neatly on a plate, setting it next to a glass of some strange juice I didn't recognize.
"Dear, it'll be a little bitter at first, but trust me, it helps."
She wasn't lying. It tasted like orange juice mixed with lemon, sugar, and something distinctly medicinal. Whatever it was, warmth spread from my stomach outward, turning the dull, painless throbbing into a light, almost drunken feeling of weightlessness. She spent the next hour checking my wounds, telling me about her garden and how Reginald was being fussy again. Turns out she'd named her plants, which I found kind of sweet. She talked about caring for them the same way she talked about me, like they were her patients too. Those pills really did wonders. I felt nothing. Not when she peeled off the rust-red, dried bandages and replaced them with clean ones. Not when she rubbed ointment into the open wounds. The scabs were still there, but the skin around them had taken on a strange color. I stared at them, my vision hazy, the world soft. Hey, aren't they supposed to be yellow? The nurse paused for a moment, a slight raise of her eyebrow as she considered the question. Then her face spread into that same reassuring smile.
"Of course, dear. That just means the medicine is flushing out all those nasty toxins from your... well, they're not so much bites as little wounds."
She paused, stroking one of my wounds. It was strange. She looked almost loving as she applied the ointment. But it wasn't me she felt that for. It was my wound. Still, I wasn't in the best state. The pain might be gone, but I was terribly tired, drifting in and out of sleep as she cared for me. When I turned to look at her, she lifted her head and met my eyes, still smiling. I woke up in my bed. Fresh bandages, clean sheets. It was dark outside. Must have slept through the whole day. The thought of getting up felt pointless, but I tried anyway. Nothing happened. My body was unbearably heavy, and I let sleep take me again. I blinked, and the setting had changed. Daylight. The weakness was receding, my mind still hazy but slowly clearing. What was happening? Still couldn't get up. I tilted my head to look at my body, wrapped in bandages. But something was wrong. Or rather, they smelled bad. Urine. And something else. Sour. Stale. I'd wet the bed. I couldn't feel it. I was vaguely aware of the dampness, but my sense of touch was distant, like my body belonged to someone else. The door creaked open. I'd like to say I tensed up, shrank back. The fear was there, but it felt distant, disconnected, like something in my brain wasn't working right, preventing the fear from fully surfacing. Fingers. Fingers I recognized, old and wrinkled,
grabbed the door and pushed it slowly, letting my nurse peer into my room.
Oh my, sorry for leaving you so long. You see, I had other patients. Reginald was absolutely frantic today, refused to take his medicine, you know.
She came over to me and turned me over like it was something she did every day. She washed me, changed the sheets, gave me some kind of shot I barely felt.
Unfortunately, you can't take the pills anymore.
She paused, something almost like regret on her face, or maybe just concern. She took my limp hand in hers. It made me realize how cold I was. She turned and looked me straight in the eyes, the cheerfulness returning to her demeanor.
But don't you worry, dear. I'm here with you.
This has been going on for days. Every so often, I get control of my body back. I've been writing this in pieces. She says I'm overexerting myself, but she's just trying to be nice. I don't really want her to leave. She's so kind, but something isn't right. I don't know what, but it's wrong. I got a message saying my insurance doesn't cover home care services. It's so sweet of her to do this on her own time. She must be a volunteer. How else would she have known I needed help?
She mentioned Reginald has been doing better the last couple of days. Something about me helping him. She says it's all part of the process. It's all part of how she helps us get better.
Story 2. I feel like my recovery isn't going as well as it should. I'm not saying this out of fear. I'm not scared or in pain. In fact, I feel calmer than I should, comfortable. But I have gaps in my memory, whole stretches of time I can't explain, and when I try to focus on them, my thoughts slip away. Let me start from the beginning. I finally made it back to my apartment. The place reeked of cleaning products and something faintly like harsh soap, bleach and dish detergent, sharp enough to burn your throat. But at least the pests were gone. The Uber driver kindly helped me up the stairs. The bandages on my legs made walking difficult. It was a little strange seeing several of my neighbors' doors marked with extermination signs and sealed off with tape. But that was nothing compared to how happy I was to finally be home. Compared to the stiff hospital bed I'd spent 4 days in, my couch felt like it belonged in a romantic movie. I barely stopped myself from flopping onto it, still a little worried about what had landed me in the hospital in the first place. Nothing under the pillows, thank God. I carefully lowered myself onto my usual spot, hissing slightly as one of the wounds on my legs stretched unpleasantly. Still, it was an improvement. The bites were painful, but they were healing, slowly. Not scabbed over yet, but at least starting to close. Remote in hand, some low-quality Netflix romance on in the background, my favorite soda. Everything I needed to be happy. At least until the knock came at the door. Seriously? They told me my insurance would cover home care, but I've been home for 2 hours. My bandages shouldn't need changing for at least a day, right? With a groan of frustration, I pulled myself off the couch. The wounds on my back and legs threatened to reopen as I slowly made my way to the door. I wasn't expecting anything special. Maybe some college kid or a tired nurse. Anyone but the elderly, cheerful woman who greeted me, slipping inside the moment the door opened.
My, what a lovely home. Oh, but you could use some cleaning. Must be hard for you right now, dear.
Her sing-song voice grated on my nerves almost as much as the way she pushed past me. "Can I help you?" I asked flatly. Pretty sure I'd just let in a saleswoman or maybe a Jehovah's Witness.
Dear, I'm here to help you with all of this.
She gestured at my bandages. So she really was my nurse. Okay. Look, I don't want to be rude, but it's been a long week. Can we just do whatever needs to be done quickly? My mother wouldn't have approved of my rudeness, but she'd never know. The woman froze for a second, looking at me with the same cheerful smile you'd see in a mayonnaise commercial. "Sit down, dear." Calm, still sweet. I headed back to the couch. The woman put a hand on my back when I stumbled, steadying me gently. Somehow she managed to avoid touching any wounds, and her hands were surprisingly warm. "Now I'll just get something from my bag. You have something to take your medicine with, right? It's bitter, but it works wonders," she chirped, heading for the door with slightly alarming energy to grab the bag she'd left. I expected some herbal concoction, but she pulled out a regular orange prescription bottle. She unscrewed the cap and shook a couple of blue and pink capsules onto her open palm. "Just 2 today, dear.
We might increase the dose later." Whatever was in that medicine, it worked fast. The pain vanished in an instant, replaced by weakness and a light dizziness. All the while, the nurse gently squeezed my shoulder. I remember how warm her hand was. After that, my memories get fuzzy. I know she put ointment on some of my worst wounds. We chatted a little, just small talk. "Any pain? Fatigue? Trouble sleeping?" she asked softly. I told her I was feeling sleepy. She just smiled. "That's normal. Means it's working, dear." That night I slept better than I had in days. Didn't wake up from the pain of accidentally scraping off a scab. No nightmares about things crawling in my bed. Just black emptiness. The next morning I woke up and found blood on my sheets. At first my mind went to the worst place, but something dulled the panic before it could fully take hold. Even though I'd never been okay with seeing my own blood. That calmness scared me a little. Still, it helped me focus. The bandages, soaked with some kind of ointment the nurse had applied yesterday, had come loose. My left arm was exposed, blood seeping from the wounds. But I couldn't help noticing. The scabs were still there, not fallen off. Maybe the cream was working. I carefully got out of bed, bundled up the sheets, and threw them on the floor. I'd deal with them later. I'd barely made it to the kitchen when another knock came at the door. I took a deep breath, leaning on the kitchen counter, trying to gather the strength to make it to the door. The medicine had worn off. Every step hurt. Every bandage rubbed against open wounds. "Coming!" The click of the doorknob cut me off. And there she was again. The same cheerful smile. The same beige cardigan. The same black bag with the tacky floral strap. "Oh, hello. Thanks for coming back," I said awkwardly, wondering how she'd gotten in. Had I left the door unlocked yesterday?
"Hello, dear. Ready for your medicine?"
Same tone, same energy. I willingly let her take over. I was tired. My whole body hurt. I just wanted it to stop. "Sure," I said. "Just give me a minute to make a sandwich or something." She gasped, covering her mouth with her hand.
"Oh, no. You need to rest, dear. Let me take care of that."
I tried to protest, but she grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the couch. The pain spiked, and the movement reminded me how well yesterday's painkillers had worked. I felt a flash of irritation as she made herself at home by my refrigerator, grabbing a cold bottle of water and handing it to me, along with another dose of blue and pink pills. Still, I couldn't complain. They worked. Within minutes, the pain faded, and the world around me started to blur. I must have been almost asleep when I was hit with a wonderful smell. Bacon. I looked from the TV, which, it turned out, I'd managed to turn back on, now playing a nature documentary, toward the kitchen. The nurse had put on an apron and was busy chopping salad. Any thought of objecting to her using my groceries was pushed aside by the anticipation of a real breakfast. and I was glad I said nothing. She made a classic breakfast. Perfectly cooked eggs, fluffy and soft. Bacon just the way I like it, a little chewy but with a crispy edge. She even made a couple of sandwiches, arranging everything neatly on a plate, setting it next to a glass of some strange juice I didn't recognize.
Dear, it'll be a little bitter at first, but trust me, it helps.
She wasn't lying.
It tasted like orange juice mixed with lemon, sugar, and something distinctly medicinal. Whatever it was, warmth spread from my stomach outward, turning the dull, painless throbbing into a light, almost drunken feeling of weightlessness. She spent the next hour checking my wounds, telling me about her garden and how Reginald was being fussy again. Turns out she'd named her plants, which I found kind of sweet. She talked about caring for them the same way she talked about me, like they were her patients too. Those pills really did wonders. I felt nothing. Not when she peeled off the rust-red, dried bandages and replaced them with clean ones. Not when she rubbed ointment into the open wounds. The scabs were still there, but the skin around them had taken on a strange color. I stared at them, my vision hazy, the world soft. Hey, aren't they supposed to be yellow? The nurse paused for a moment, a slight raise of her eyebrow as she considered the question. Then her face spread into that same reassuring smile. Of course, dear. That just means the medicine is flushing out all those nasty toxins from your, well, they're not so much bites as little wounds. She paused, stroking one of my wounds. It was strange. She looked almost loving as she applied the ointment. But it wasn't me she felt that for. It was my wound. Still, I wasn't in the best state. The pain might be gone, but I was terribly tired, drifting in and out of sleep as she cared for me. When I turned to look at her, she lifted her head and met my eyes, still smiling. I woke up in my bed, fresh bandages, clean sheets. It was dark outside. Must have slept through the whole day. The thought of getting up felt pointless, but I tried anyway. Nothing happened. My body was unbearably heavy, and I let sleep take me again.
I blinked, and the setting had changed. Daylight. The weakness was receding, my mind still hazy but slowly clearing. What was happening? Still couldn't get up. I tilted my head to look at my body, wrapped in bandages, but something was wrong. Or rather, they smelled bad. Urine. And something else, sour, stale. I'd wet the bed. I couldn't feel it. I was vaguely aware of the dampness, but my sense of touch was distant, like my body belonged to someone else. The door creaked open. I'd like to say I tensed up, shrank back. The fear was there, but it felt distant, disconnected. Like something in my brain wasn't working right, preventing the fear from fully surfacing. Fingers. Fingers I recognized, old and wrinkled, grabbed the door and pushed it slowly, letting my nurse peer into my room.
Oh my, sorry for leaving you so long. You see, I had other patients. Reginald was absolutely frantic today, refused to take his medicine, you know.
She came over to me and turned me over like it was something she did every day. She washed me, changed the sheets, gave me some kind of shot I barely felt.
Unfortunately, you can't take the pills anymore.
She paused, something almost like regret on her face, or maybe just concern. She took my limp hand in hers. It made me realize how cold I was. She turned and looked me straight in the eyes, the cheerfulness returning to her demeanor.
But don't you worry, dear. I'm here with you.
This has been going on for days. Every so often, I get control of my body back.
I've been writing this in pieces. She says I'm overexerting myself, but she's just trying to be nice. I don't really want her to leave. She's so kind, but something isn't right. I don't know what, but it's wrong.
I got a message saying my insurance doesn't cover home care services. It's so sweet of her to do this on her own time. She must be a volunteer. How else would she have known I needed help? She mentioned Reginald has been doing better the last couple of days. Something about me helping him. She says it's all part of the process. It's all part of how she helps us get better. Story 3. I found out what happened to the pirate crew that disappeared in 1699, and I regret it. Jack's Falls isn't the kind of town you read about in travel magazines. Population around 3,000, one main street with a hardware store and a diner that closes at 6. A rocky, unwelcoming coastline. The town is named after Captain Jack Morgan, a pirate who supposedly deserted British ships in 1699 and vanished somewhere near the coast. Local legend says he and his crew made it ashore with their loot, but no one ever saw them again. Most people assume they escaped by boat or died out there. I used to think that too, until 3 months ago, when I found out the truth. Mark had been obsessed with Captain Jack's story since childhood. He grew up on his grandfather's tales of hidden treasure and secret caves, stories that seem amazing at 10 and pathetic at 27. But Mark held on to that passion. He spent years studying old naval records, researching tidal patterns, walking every inch of the coast, looking for cave entrances that matched historical descriptions. His girlfriend Sarah went along with it, mostly because she found his enthusiasm endearing and because she loved hiking. Me? I went along because Mark was my best friend. When Mark called me that October morning, his voice was trembling with excitement. "I found it, John. I found it!" He'd been exploring a section of cliff about 2 miles north of town, a spot we'd driven past dozens of times without seeing anything unusual. But a recent storm had caused a small landslide, and Mark noticed something that made him climb down. A small opening, partially hidden by centuries of erosion and debris, but clearly man-made. He'd taken photos, measurements, logged the coordinates. He wanted to go back with proper gear and get inside. "Either this weekend or never," he said.
A low tide like this won't happen again until next year, and the town council's already talking about putting up barriers along that whole section. So this is our only shot. I should have said no. I had a dozen good reasons. My knees weren't what they used to be. I had work on Monday. Cave diving, or spelunking, or whatever you call crawling into tight, dark spaces, had never been my idea of a good time. But I could hear in Mark's voice that he was going with or without me. I'd known him since we were 10. I couldn't let my best friend do something that stupid alone. Saturday morning, Sarah picked me up in Mark's truck, the bed already loaded with gear. Helmets with mounted lights, ropes, carabiners, a first aid kit, energy bars, water bottles, and what looked like a small sledgehammer. "In case we need to widen a passage," Sarah explained, catching my look. She was tall, athletic. Mark told me she ran marathons and had opinions about hydration packs. She worked as a physical therapist and approached Mark's treasure hunting with the same enthusiasm she brought to helping people recover from knee surgery. "Mark's already on site, doing some preliminary scouting. He's been there since 4. The drive took 20 minutes, the last 5 on a dirt road that barely qualified as a path. We parked where the trees gave way to scrub and sharp rocks, the gray-blue line of the ocean visible in the distance. The wind off the water was cold enough to sting your face. Mark was waiting at the cliff edge, practically vibrating with excitement. He'd rigged a rope system to make the descent easier and explained it to us twice before we started down. The drop wasn't long, maybe 100 feet, but it was enough to get my heart pounding. The cave entrance was as unimpressive as I'd feared. A crack in the rock, about 3 feet wide. Mark had cleared some of the loose debris, but it still looked iffy.
"You're sure this is the place?" I asked. "The historical records speak for themselves," Mark said, pulling out his phone to show me a photo of a yellowed document. "This is a British naval log from the HMS Dartmouth, dated November 16, 1999. They chased Morgan's crew right to this stretch of coast. The pirates made it ashore, and no one ever saw them again. 18 men, John. 18 men and a whole hold of Spanish silver, just gone." "Maybe they drowned," I said. "Then where are the bodies?" Mark had that familiar gleam in his eye, the one that meant he'd already made up his mind. "This cave goes somewhere. I can feel air moving. There's something in there." Sarah already had her helmet on. "We stick together, we stay in radio contact, and if anything feels wrong, we turn back. Deal?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to suggest calling the town, getting proper permits, doing this the right way. But I saw the desperation on Mark's face, the way his hands kept clenching and unclenching. This was his lifelong dream, his one chance to prove that years of research meant something. Sarah was already at the entrance, checking her gear, and I just gave in. We went in single file, Mark first with the brightest light, then Sarah, then me. I'm not a big guy, but the entrance was tight for me. I had to turn sideways and exhale to squeeze through. The rock scraped my back and chest. For the first 10 feet, I felt like the cliff was swallowing me, the walls pressing in, and then suddenly it opened up. The chamber was about the size of a large bedroom, the ceiling high enough to stand upright. Our lights cut through the dark, illuminating rough stone walls and a floor that sloped gently downward. The air was cool but not cold, with a faint smell I couldn't place. Something mineral, salt maybe. But there was something else underneath it. Something organic. "See?" Mark's voice echoed slightly. "This was worked. Look at the walls." He was right. In places, you could see tool marks. Places where someone had deliberately widened the passage or smoothed rough spots. It wasn't obvious unless you were looking for it. But once Mark pointed it out, I couldn't unsee it. We kept going. The cave branched twice, but Mark seemed sure of the way, consulting a hand-drawn map he'd made from his research. He'd overlaid British naval charts, geological surveys, and local folklore into a composite map showing the most likely route the pirates would have taken. I didn't understand half of it, but Sarah seemed confident enough in Mark's knowledge to keep going. The temperature stayed consistent, cool but not cold, and that faint smell grew stronger. Not quite mineral anymore, something else, like old copper coins, old metal. I found myself breathing through my mouth. About 40 minutes in, we stopped to drink water and get our bearings. Mark's excitement was palpable, but I noticed Sarah was quieter than usual. When I asked if she was okay, she just nodded and said the smell was bothering her too. We agreed to give it another hour, then turn back no matter what. The passage narrowed and widened in irregular patterns, sometimes forcing us to duck, sometimes opening into spaces so large our lights couldn't reach the ceiling. In one of the larger chambers, we found remains of old torches, charred chunks of wood that crumbled when Mark tried to pick one up. Evidence that someone had been here before, which made sense given the pirate story. But it also made the place feel heavier, like we were walking in the footsteps of the dead. "Look," Sarah said suddenly, shining her light at the wall. Faint marks scratched into the stone. Not random damage, deliberate scratches. Symbols that might have been letters worn away by time.
Mark ran his fingers over them, his breathing quickening. He pulled out his phone and took several photos from different angles. "This is it," he whispered. "This is 17th century script, I'm sure of it. Look at the way the R is formed, and that long S that looks like an F. That matches the period." He was almost trembling, tracing the letters with his finger. His knowledge of colonial history finally paying off. The passage narrowed again, forcing us to duck, then crawl. My knees immediately regretted every decision that had led me here. The walls felt closer, and I was acutely aware of the tons of rock above us, the vast ocean somewhere beyond, and the very real possibility of getting stuck, lost, or worse. After maybe 20 minutes of that, my hands numb despite the gloves, my knees aching like I'd been hit with hammers, the passage opened into another chamber, bigger than the first, maybe 15 feet across and 10 high. Our lights played across the walls, revealing more tool marks and patches of soot from torches. Then, Mark swept his light across the far end and froze. Holy shit. A human skeleton. It sat propped against the far wall, still wearing the rotted remains of clothing. The fabric had long since turned to brown rags, but you could still make out what might have been brass buttons scattered nearby. The skull was tilted forward, jaw hanging open in a silent scream, one arm outstretched like it had been reaching for something. Around the bones, scraps of leather, a rusted knife, and what looked like the remains of a small barrel, its wooden staves collapsed inward. Sarah made a sound like she'd been hit. Mark just stood there, his light fixed on the skeleton. This is real?" Sarah asked. "Yeah." Mark's voice was barely there. He moved closer, careful not to touch anything, and shone his light on the remains. "Look at the clothing."
The cut, the button style. I'd swear this is late 17th century. This is one of them, one of Morgan's crew. But what made all three of us stop, what made us truly freeze, was the wall behind the skeleton. Someone had carved words into the stone. Not just a few marks, paragraphs. It must have taken days, maybe weeks. The text started high on the wall and worked its way down in uneven lines, becoming more and more illegible. Mark moved closer, shining his light on the text, and began to read aloud. His voice wavered slightly. November 15th, 1699. 12 of us now. The cave is deeper than we thought. The captain says there's a passage through to the other side of the peninsula, but Davis and Mockton went to scout 2 days ago and haven't returned. Sometimes we hear them screaming from below, but we can't find them. The handwriting was crude, the words misspelled, the marks of a man who'd learned to write later in life. But the meaning was clear. Mark lowered his light and found more text, carved in jagged, shaking lines. November 18th. Food's running out. The captain's rationing. We don't dare go back the way we came. The Navy's probably waiting at the entrance. James swears he heard Davis calling him from somewhere below, but there's nothing there. The air tastes wrong in here. Thomas says it's just damp, but I know something's not right. Oh my God, Sarah breathed. The text became more cramped and disjointed as it went down the wall, like the writer was losing his mind. November 22nd. 5 more dead. They went looking for another way out, for fresh air, for anything to escape this tomb. The captain's changing. He talks about voices in the dark. William says the treasure is cursed, that we should leave it, throw it in the deepest hole we can find. but the captain won't hear it.
He guards it like a dragon in the old stories my mother used to tell.
The walls are warm now, though that can't be this far down. We're past where the sun reaches. The water that drips from above is thick and sticky. It stains our clothes. Jacob drank some yesterday against warnings, and he's been sick since. Can't stop shitting himself. The smell is terrible. I reached out and touched the wall where the writer mentioned warmth. He was right. It was noticeably warmer than it should be this far underground. At least 10 degrees. I pulled my hand back and found my fingertips slightly damp with that sticky residue. "Keep reading," I said. The text was barely legible now, the letters carved so hard and fast that small bits of stone had flaked out of the grooves. November 27th. Only 3 of us left. Jacob died yesterday. We buried him in the tunnel, but this morning he was gone, like the cave had absorbed him whole. The captain took the treasure and Thomas deeper in. He says the voices showed him the way. He's lost his mind. We've all lost our minds. The cave breathes, I swear it. But at night I hear a sound, a great rushing, like a whale singing. The walls pulse. Yesterday I saw John Carver halfway into the rock, still alive, unable to move, his eyes following me as I passed. He begged me for help, but I didn't know what to do. I tried to dig him out, but the rock was soft like clay, and it only made him sink deeper. When I came back hours later, he was gone. Just a stain, like someone spilled wine. The thing in the caves. It's hungry. It feeds slowly. It savors. "Okay," I said. "Okay, we need to go back." "Are you kidding me?" Mark's eyes were wild in the beam of his headlamp. "This is it, John. This is a primary source account of what happened to them. And the treasure. He says the captain took it deeper."
It's still down there.
"Mark, it's pretty clear this guy lost his mind," Sarah said, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "Breathing walls? People merging with rock?" "Then explain that." Mark pointed to a spot on the wall where the text ended. There, carved in what looked like a last, desperate effort, were the final words. "It took them all. It won't let us leave." Below that, a date. December 3rd, 1699. And below that, carved so deep the stone had cracked. "It beats." The silence that followed was broken only by our breathing and the faint, distant sound of water dripping somewhere beyond our lights. "There's another passage," Mark said, pointing to an opening in the far wall. "If the captain went deeper, that's where he went. The treasure's down there." "Mark, no," I said. "This is insane. We need to document this and come back with—" "By the time we do that, the tide will have sealed the entrance. You know it will. This is our only chance." He was already moving toward the passage, Sarah following after a moment's hesitation. I looked back at the skeleton one more time, at the empty eye sockets and the outstretched hand, and then I followed my friends deeper into the earth. The passage was tighter than anything we'd encountered so far, so tight we had to take off our packs and push them ahead of us, crawling on our bellies. The rock pressed in from all sides, and for one terrible moment I was sure I was stuck. My chest too big for the opening, my hips wedged between unyielding stone. Then something gave, and I spilled out into a larger space where Mark and Sarah waited. "You okay?" Sarah asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. My hands were shaking. This chamber was different. The walls had a strange texture, less like stone and more like something else. Coral, maybe, or cartilage. And the smell was stronger here, that old copper smell mixed with something organic, slightly rotten. Mark ran his hand along the wall and frowned. This isn't limestone.
What is it?
Sarah asked. I don't know. It's softer and warm, really warm. I touched the wall and immediately wished I hadn't. He was right. It was warm, almost room temperature, and the surface had a slight give to it, like pressing on firm rubber. When I pulled my hand away, my fingertips were damp, but not with water. Something thicker, slightly viscous. I rubbed my fingers together, and the fluid felt alkaline, like the slick that forms when soap dissolves. We need to go back, I said again. Look. Mark's light caught something embedded in the wall. A coin. Gold. Its surface darkened to a greenish hue, but unmistakable. I think that's a Spanish doubloon. Sarah, get a picture. The camera flash blinded all of us for a moment. Mark pulled a small pry bar from his pack and started working the coin out of the wall. Mark, don't! The coin came free with a wet, sucking sound. Mark held it up triumphantly, turning it in the light. Sarah made a strange noise, and we both looked where she was pointing. The spot where the coin had been was bleeding. I wanted to say it was water stains, mineral deposits, but it was blood. Thick, dark blood, seeping from the hole and beginning to run down the wall in rivulets. What the fuck? Mark whispered. The wall around the wound pulsed, slowly at first, then faster, rhythmic, wave-like contractions. And somewhere in the distance, deep in the cave, we heard a sound. Like thunder, like a drum, like a heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. Okay, Sarah said, her voice tight.
Okay, maybe we should...
The blood on the wall flowed faster, the pulsing waves spreading wider. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Other sections of the walls shifting, flexing. We need to go, Sarah said. Now. But Mark was already moving forward, his light catching something in the passage ahead. Wait, do you see that? More coins. Dozens of them, embedded in the walls and floor like metal rivets in skin. And beyond them, open space. A cavern. Against every instinct, we moved forward. The walls here were organic, no question. The texture was wrong, the color strange. Grey had given way to reddish, shot through with dark patches that looked disturbingly like bruises. The floor was wet, coated with a thin layer of that same viscous fluid, and our boots made soft, sucking sounds with every step. The heartbeat sound was louder now, more distinct. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, impossible to locate. Thump, 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 thump. The next chamber opened before us, and Mark's light fell on the treasure. It wasn't a pile of gold, the way we'd all imagined. Instead, coins and jewels were embedded in the walls and floor, like they were growing out of the red organic tissue that made up the cave. Some still looked like coins, others were half dissolved, their edges blurred, absorbed into the flesh. And at the center of it all, surrounded by the treasure, were the bodies. 300 years later, they should have been skeletons. They weren't. They were corpses, preserved in varying stages of decay. Their clothes rotted to rags, but flesh still clinging to bone. Some were sunk into the floor, halfway into the tissue, like the cave was slowly digesting them. Others stood upright, held in place by red growth that wrapped around their limbs and torsos like vines.
One of the Moorwood might have been a captain's coat. Its jaw hung open, and something wet glistened in the empty eye socket.
This isn't real, Sarah whispered. This can't be real.
The heartbeat was so loud now I could feel it in my whole body. Thump, 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 thump. And as I watched, one of the corpses moved. Slight at first, a twitch of fingers, a turn of the head. Then the jaw began to slowly open and close, and the empty eye sockets turned toward us. Another corpse moved, then another. The tissue holding them in place began to pulse and contract, pushing them forward, helping them move. They detached from the walls with wet, tearing sounds, leaving behind dark cavities that immediately began to close. "Run!" I shouted. "Go!" We turned and ran back the way we came, but the passage was changing. The walls were closing in, the space narrowing with each heavy heartbeat. Behind me, I could hear the sounds of the things detaching, the scrape of their movements as they gave chase. Mark reached the tight tunnel first and launched himself into it, his pack scraping against the walls. Sarah followed, and I watched her haul herself forward with desperate strength. The space was even tighter than before, the walls warm and wet and pulsing, slowly contracting like they were trying to swallow us. I looked back and saw the dead approaching. They moved with terrible purpose, their motions jerky and wrong, limbs bending in directions they shouldn't. The captain was in the lead, and as I watched, he opened his mouth, and something wet and glistening inside tensed and reached toward me. I threw myself into the tight space, and immediately I knew I was in trouble. Too tight, the walls pressing from all sides. I could hear Sarah ahead of me, see Mark's light beyond, but I couldn't move forward.
The tissue around me pulsed and contracted, and I felt something give beneath my stomach, the floor softening, beginning to pull me down.
"John!"
Mark's voice panicked. "John, come on!" I struggled, my pack catching on something, my helmet scraping the rock. Behind me, something was in the passage now. I could smell it, that rotten copper smell, feel its breath on the back of my neck. The floor beneath me softened further, and with horror, I realized it wasn't just soft. It was dissolving. I felt the fabric of my pants beginning to adhere, fibers pulling apart, cloth breaking down. The passage floor was slowly, steadily digesting my clothing. With one last desperate heave, I lunged forward, something in my chest popping, and tumbled out onto the cave floor. Mark grabbed me, hauled me to my feet. "Go, go, go!" Sarah shouted. We ran. The walls pulsed, narrowing and widening with each heartbeat, trying to slow us. More dead were emerging, pulling themselves from the walls like hatching insects, their movements becoming more coordinated as we watched. The tissue responded to them differently, helping them, not hindering, pushing them forward to catch us. We reached the skeleton, the inscription, and I thought we might make it. The exit was close. We could reach the rope, climb out, get to the truck, leave this nightmare behind. Mark screamed. I turned in time to see him go down hard. The skeleton had come alive and latched onto his ankle, gripping with such force that Mark cried out in pain. His helmet flew off, light strobing across the walls. More of the dead were emerging from the passage behind us, at least 5 or 6, with more following. Mark was on his stomach, kicking desperately with his free leg, trying to break free. The thing holding him wouldn't let go. Its fingers dug into his jeans, and where they gripped, dark patches began to spread, the fabric dissolving under its touch. Sarah didn't hesitate. She ran to Mark, grabbed his arms, pulled. Her face was a mask of strain and terror, tears streaming down her cheeks. I've got you, Mark." But the thing was winning,
pulling him back inch by inch toward the others. Mark's fingers scraped the stone floor, leaving bloody trails. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw absolute terror. "John, help me!" I took a step forward, my hands clenched into fists. Every instinct screamed at me to grab Mark, to help pull him free. Then I saw what was behind him. More of them. A dozen, at least, shambling forward from the deeper tunnels, bent at unnatural angles. The captain was among them, his rotted coat still hanging from his shoulders, his jaw moving slowly like he was trying to speak. Behind them, the passage was narrowing, the walls contracting in waves, the organic tissue tensing and pulsing. The opening was already half its previous size and shrinking with every heartbeat. Thump, thump. Thump, thump. Thump, thump. Sarah looked up at me, still holding Mark's hand, and in her eyes I saw the same realization. There was no time. Even if we freed Mark right now, even if we somehow made it past all of them, the passage was closing, and we had seconds, maybe 30, maybe less, before we were sealed in here forever with these things and this breathing, digesting nightmare. "John, please!" Mark's voice cracking, breaking with fear, with pain, with desperation. "Please don't leave me! Sarah, don't let him!" I saw the passage ahead narrowing further, now barely 3 feet across. I saw the dead approaching, their bony hands reaching. I saw Sarah straining to hold Mark, her boots scrabbling at a floor that was beginning to soften beneath her, the tissue responding to her touch, starting to digest her, too. In seconds, she'd be stuck, trapped, and then we'd all die here. I ran. Not toward them, away. Toward the exit, toward daylight, toward survival. "John!" Sarah's scream followed me, full of rage and terror and disbelief. "John, you coward! Come back!" I kept running. My boots pounded on stone that was rapidly becoming flesh, each step sinking slightly before I could push off. I didn't look back. I couldn't look back. If I looked back, I'd stop, and if I stopped, I'd die. Some animal part of my brain had decided that my life was worth more than theirs. "No, no, John, please! Mark!" Sarah's voice was fading, but I could still hear her sobs. "Mark, hold on! I won't leave you! I won't!" The passage was narrowing fast, the organic tissue contracting in waves. Behind me, I heard Sarah crying, Mark begging, the wet sounds of the cave. Something had reached them. Sounds I'll never forget, never be able to describe. I kept running. Guilt flooded through me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. My legs moved on their own, pure animal panic overriding everything else. Friendship, loyalty, basic human decency. I reached the next chamber, the one we'd first entered, and I heard footsteps behind me. Not the shambling of the dead, the footsteps of someone living. I risked a glance back and saw Sarah. She'd let go of Mark. She'd made the same choice I had. Her face was streaked with tears and blood, her own blood, where something had touched her. She was sobbing, her breath coming in ragged gasps. When she saw me looking, she screamed something, but I couldn't make out the words over the pounding of my own heart, the pulse of the cave, the wet, sliding sounds of the dead pursuing. We ran together toward the passage, the tunnel that would take us up and out, back to daylight, back to air that didn't smell of copper, back to stone that was actually stone. I could see the opening ahead, that blessed slit of gray light. Then I saw what stood between us and it. The passage was narrowing unevenly. About 15 feet ahead, the walls were opening and closing in a steady rhythm, widening to about 3 feet, then narrowing. Thump, thump, open. Thump, thump, closed. Thump, thump, open. If we timed it right, we could slip through when it opened. If we timed it wrong, we'd be caught when it closed. I sprinted harder, my lungs burning, my legs screaming. Sarah was right behind me. I could hear her gasping, hear her steps on the stone that was becoming flesh. "On 3!" she shouted. I reached the passage first. It was open wide enough to get through, but as I approached, it began to close, the walls contracting. I timed it. Open for about 3 seconds, closed for 2. Open, closed, open. "Now!" Sarah screamed. I lunged forward, threw myself into the gap on my stomach, and the walls closed around me, scraping my back and chest. For one terrible second, I was sure I was stuck, that the passage would close and cut me in half. Then I was through, tumbling into the chamber beyond. I turned to help Sarah. She was halfway through when the passage began to close. Not with its usual measured pulse, with a violent spasm, like the cave had suddenly clenched a muscle. The walls slammed together, catching Sarah's left leg below the knee. She screamed, a sound of pure agony that didn't sound human anymore.
Help me! John, help me!
I scrambled forward, grabbed her outstretched hands, and pulled. She screamed louder, her fingers gripping my wrists so hard they'd leave bruises. But I couldn't move her. The passage held her leg and wouldn't let go. When I looked down, I saw why. The floor beneath her was softening, becoming true flesh. Her trapped leg was sinking into it, the fabric of her jeans dissolving. But worse, the flesh was slowly creeping up her leg, beginning to absorb her. I watched it spread, watched her pants fall apart, watched her skin begin to blister and melt.
Pull harder,
she shrieked.
God damn it, John, pull!
I pulled. I braced my feet against the wall and pulled with everything I had. Sarah's hands were slick with sweat and that viscous fluid that was everywhere now. Behind her, I could hear movement in the tunnel, hear the things approaching. The passage clenched again, and Sarah screamed as her leg was crushed. I heard bone break, saw her knee bend the wrong way. The absorbing flesh was up to her mid-thigh now, the decay spreading faster. Her shirt was beginning to adhere to the ground, the fabric pulling apart, threads dissolving. Behind her, the dead captain reached the passage. His rotting face arranged itself into something like a smile. He reached out, fingers reaching for Sarah's back. The passage clenched again, and this time I saw Sarah's eyes widen with a different kind of pain. I understood. The cave's flesh was inside her now. It had soaked through her skin and was working on her organs, her blood, everything that made her, her. And the captain's hand was 6 inches from her head. I looked at Sarah, looked at her hand, looked at the passage which was beginning to close, at the pulsing flesh that would seal me in here if I didn't move in the next 5 seconds. Sarah saw it in my face, saw the decision I was making.
John, no, don't you dare, don't you.
I let go of her hands. She grabbed for me, fingers closing on air, her face twisting with despair.
John!
I stepped back.
The captain's hand was almost at her. Sarah's hand reached for me, fingers splayed. One last, desperate attempt to grab me, to pull me back into this nightmare with her, to make me share her fate. I pushed her hand away with my foot. Not hard. I didn't need to. Just enough to knock her hand aside, to give me the extra second I needed, to turn and throw myself into the contracting gap. Her scream followed me.
Coward! You fucking coward! I hope it finds you! I hope it never lets you go!
I squeezed through the narrowing space, felt the tissue close around me, felt it begin to pool, digest, absorb. For one terrible moment, I was sure I would die there, stuck halfway between chambers, the flesh slowly consuming me, Sarah's screams echoing in my ears. Then my fingers found solid stone, real stone, and I lunged forward with a strength born of pure terror. The tissue tore, but I came free, leaving scraps of clothing and skin behind, and I crawled toward light, toward air, toward escape. I burst out, nearly falling off the cliff, Mark's rigged rope catching me. I hung there, gasping, my whole body shaking. From inside the cave, I heard words, muffled by stone but still audible. John! John, please! Sarah's here! Sarah's... Mark's voice. He was still alive, still conscious, still begging me to come back. I hauled myself up the rope, ignoring the cries, scrambled to the top of the cliff and ran for Mark's truck. The keys were in Sarah's pocket, but I knew Mark kept a spare under the wheel well. My hands shaking, I got it started and drove away without looking back. I told the police I'd gone alone, that Mark and Sarah had stayed behind, planning a different hike, that I'd suggested exploring the caves, but they'd been more interested in the coastal trail.
I lied to their parents, their friends, the search and rescue teams that looked for them for 2 weeks. I lied to everyone. The cave entrance had sealed itself. When searchers finally found it 3 days later, it looked like it had been closed for centuries. Just another crack in the cliff leading nowhere. They went in with equipment and cameras and found only rock. The passages were gone, the tunnels collapsed. The organic tissue vanished like it had never existed. But I know the truth. I know that somewhere down there, it breathes in the dark, slowly digesting my friends over years, decades, centuries. I know that somewhere in that living rock, Mark and Sarah are still conscious, still aware. Their bodies breaking down cell by cell, the cave savoring them like fine wine. And I know that I left them there. I moved away from Jack's Falls 3 weeks after they were declared missing. I couldn't stand the looks from their families, couldn't sleep in that apartment knowing they'd helped me move in, couldn't walk past the diner where Sarah always ordered extra hash browns, and Mark made fun of her for it. I thought distance would help. It didn't. 3 days after I left, I found something in my pocket. The gold coin. The one Mark had pulled from the wall. I don't remember picking it up. I don't remember putting it in my pocket. But there it was, crusted with dried blood. I threw it in a dumpster 6 blocks from my new apartment. The next morning, it was on my nightstand. I drove 2 hours out of town and threw it in a lake, watched it sink into the dark water. That night, I woke up with it in my hand, gripping it so hard the edges cut into my palm. The sheets were soaked through with sweat, with that same sticky residue. The pillow smelled of copper. I tried putting the coin in a bank safe deposit box. The next day, the bank called to say there'd been some error with my box number. And when I went to check, the box was empty, and the coin was in my car's cup holder. So now I keep it. I carry it with me everywhere, because I've learned that fighting it only makes it worse. And every day it gets a little warmer. Every day I feel it pulse a little stronger, that rhythmic sound I heard in the cave. Sometimes when I hold it, I hear them. Not quite voices, but something like them. a distant crying that could be wind in a tunnel, and underneath it, words repeating over and over in Sarah's voice. Come back, come back, come back. Last week, I caught myself looking up directions to Jack's Falls. I don't remember picking up my phone. I don't remember typing anything. But there it was, the route calculated. Estimated arrival time, 3:47 a.m. The coin gets hotter. Last night it burned my palm, leaving a mark that looks disturbingly like a mouth. And when I sleep, I dream of tunnels, warm, wet walls pulsing with life. My friends embedded in the red flesh, their eyes watching me as I pass. But the worst part, the thing that keeps me awake at night, staring at the ceiling, unable to escape what I've done, is that sometimes when I hold the coin, I can feel it beating. Thump, 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 thump. And I know with absolute certainty that the cave is waiting for me to return. The cave remembers me. It tasted me when I escaped, and now it wants to consume me whole. It's patient, this thing that lived before humans learned to make fire, long before pirates stumbled into it and became just more prey to be savored for centuries. It can wait. It has time. And eventually, whether through guilt or curiosity or some pull I can't even understand, I know I'll go back. The cave is patient. And it's hungry.
If you're reading this and you live near Jack's Falls, stay away from the cliffs north of town. Don't go looking for cave entrances or pirate treasure. Don't try to investigate if you hear sounds coming from the rock. And if you go anyway, despite this warning, despite everything I've told you, if you find yourself in tunnels where it's too warm, if you see coins embedded in walls that feel like flesh, if you hear a heartbeat echoing in the dark, run. Don't look back. Don't try to save anyone. Don't hesitate. Just run. And pray it lets you go. Today's episode turned out to be quite long. Thank you for joining me today. Should I continue the Reddit column? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, friends.